an intriguing 19th century aquarium set.
Alright, let's get this project going. The first thing I have to do is I have to take that 1-inch Delrin rod and cut it into 3 equal length segments, because I'm going to start working on the cigar holder tips first, then I'll work on the actual barrels. So 3 cigar holders, I need 3 tip blanks, which means cutting that rod into 3 equal length segments. Nothing special here, just some bandsaw work. I put a stop block on the table of the bandsaw, use that to hold the material in the same spot, cut 3 times, I get 3 equal length segments. Pretty simple stuff. Alright, let me explain what's going on here. I was waiting for a tail chuck to arrive for that lathe. That's an add-on accessory, and I didn't order one at the time I ordered the lathe. So I had to order one from Amazon. And while I was waiting for it, I thought I would go ahead, drill the holes in these tip blanks, and then just have that done and move on later with the rest of the construction. So these next few clips are demonstrating the steps that I used to have to go through just to center drill round stock. The first thing that you've got to do is you've got to make sure that the material is going to sit squarely in the drill press vise, and to do that you have to make sure that it has a square end. Now I found the best way to do that is to simply take a disc sander, make sure that everything is at 90 degrees, and then simply put the material next to the guide and grind the ends flat. And by doing that, you come up with a sharp perpendicular angle, and that ensures that the material will sit square in the drill press. Finding the center of round stock is actually fairly simple. You just use a V-square and a scribe. You hold the material in the square, scribe a line, rotate the material, scribe again. Do this several times, and where the lines meet, that's the center.
The remnants of this larger wall here, this has been chopped off once. Okay, so that all ties in nicely with bathhouses, doesn't it? So.
Now it's simply a matter of locating the bit and drilling the hole. This system has some drawbacks, particularly when you start getting into larger sized drill bits. Inevitably you have to move the material to put a larger bit in, and once you move the material you've messed up your alignment, and I'll show this in the next clip. Alright, this project is very quickly turning into a classic example of why I wanted a lathe. Even with my absolute best efforts of finding the center of this material, getting it centered and getting it lined up and everything right in the drill press, what happens? It gets drilled off center. This always plagued me. The whole time I was trying to make smoking pipes, smoking pipe stems, and tenons using a drill press, this is always the result I got. I just could never nail down center drilling round material. You know, and you look at this one, you know, here's another one. Best effort made to find the center, and it drilled off center. Alright, let's pick up the action here. It's about a week later. I got the tail chuck in, I got it installed. I've got one of the tip blanks there in the lathe chuck. I've also got a 1/2" bit mounted in the tail chuck with a piece of painter's tape there marking the depth that I want to drill. Now, why this system works so much better than a drill press is that the lathe chuck is self-centering. So you simply put the material in the chuck, tighten the chuck, and it centers it in the tool. Now, that's not perfect when you're trying to do ultra-high precision work. You might need to verify that the material is centered using a dial indicator or something like that. But for purposes of making, a cigar holder, it's going to be sufficiently accurate enough. And you can see here, it's just a matter of just turning the dial, moving the chuck and the bit forward, and boring out the center of the material. This works so well, I was actually able to correct the off-center holes that I had drilled earlier by just simply putting them in the chuck. And in the case of the larger tip blanks, I hadn't drilled that far into the material, so it was pretty easy to correct. With the smaller pieces, I just simply used a larger drill bit and was able to correct the error. I probably should explain the last clip, because you saw there that there were some big pieces and some little pieces. Well, obviously the large pieces, those are the actual tip blanks. That's what I'm going to carve the tips out of. The smaller pieces were the tenons. I decided to go with the inserted tenons rather than to make a tenon on the lathe. That lets me use more material to fashion a tip with. So yeah, so much simpler using a lathe as opposed to a drill press. Now we get to the fun part. Now we get to actual lathe work. What I've got there is I've got one of the tenon blanks mounted up in the chuck. I've got a carbide cutter there in the tool holder. What I have to do now is I have to remove the material for the tenon. Basically, I'm necking it down, I believe is the term. Reducing the diameter so that it will fit into the 1/2" hole that I bored in the tip blanks. I have to do 3 of these. I think overall it took an hour and a half to do, but it's just a matter of just passing that carbide cutter back and forth, reducing the diameter until eventually I was able to get it to fit. And now normally this is where your more highbrow creators would insert a montage clip of the various passes being made on this tenon to reduce it in size. We don't have time for that. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get right to the end here. Eventually I was able to make enough passes to where I reduced it down and was finally able to make it fit. Well, I had to mute this clip because there was music playing in the background and I didn't realize it. But what I'm doing here is spiral drill bits do not drill flat bottom holes. The angle at the bottom of the hole will match the angle of the tip of the drill bit. So in order to make these tenons fit and to really fit right, I need to bevel the end of the tenon at the same angle as the drill bit so that it fits the angle at the bottom of the hole. I know, sounds a bit complicated, but if I just want to get the best fit, I need to angle the end of the tenon. Easiest way to do that is just set the cutter to the angle at the end of the drill bit, and the way to do that is just mount the drill bit in the chuck, set the angle of the tool, and then I'm ready to cut. I glued those tips and tenons together with some 2-part epoxy. While I was waiting for it to cure, I thought I would work on an accent piece for these cigar holders, and so I'm using a piece of 3/8 inch acrylic here called a knife scale, and I'm using a bottle cap there to mark some circles. And what I did was I just simply used my bandsaw to cut out those circles, and drilled a hole through them 1/4 inch and mounted them on the same bolt that I used earlier to cut my wood blanks. And I simply mounted that bolt in the lathe and spent some time turning those acrylic discs down to size, and I think yeah, those are going to work really well as color accent pieces on these cigar holders. Laying around in one of my, many miscellaneous parts drawers, I found a high-speed steel cutter. This was something that I had made for some project, maybe the clock project that I never did launch. It's something, but it's the ideal size to mount on this lathe and clean the excess epoxy off of that tenon, the joint there between where the tenon and the tip meet. It was, fairly large globs of epoxy, and this was the perfect size to just get in there and dig all that material out.